Okay, so we have here the 2006 International. It's either 7400 or a Workstar. This is the bell housing. As you can see, it's got a access port. So it's cracked there. It's cracked here, so about a quarter of this isn't held in anymore. It is the motor mount section of the bell housing that is broken. So we have one motor mount over there, and then as we swing along, there's a spring. See the spring right there that holds up the transmission. On this side, that is the other half of the spring, and it is no longer attached to the transmission. You can see that little metal plate right there. That's where the spring hangs on. So this entire side of this engine isn't really held in anymore of the engine and transmission, so you definitely get a little play in the shifter. So the first thing I need to do, because we got to pull the transmission out to replace that, the first thing I have to do is remove the sander chute. So I gotta take off the spinner, and then I have to take off 2 bolts there for the shaft, and then 2 bolts up there for the motor. 2 bolts up there for the motor, and then lift that up, and then remove these bolts here that are around the bottom half of the chute, so I can remove this, so I can have better access to getting the jack and stuff in here. Okay, so to get this spinner shaft off, these 2 bolts there, there's a bolt on each side of the motor, and then there are 2 bolts down there on a flange, or a bracket. So I gotta take those out, and then I can pull this up and then remove the bolts around the outside of the chute. So I got 2 bolts there, 1, 2 there, probably the same on the other side. That thing is not very light. Alright. Let's see. Oh, look at that. Looks like another truck again. A regular truck without that thing in the way. And they're nice because it'll drops the material, salt or sand, in front of your rear wheels, so you can get traction when you're driving. But it kind of stinks in the scenario where that's always hanging down. So I think the next thing I'm going to do is probably get a jack and a rod and prop this transmission up a little bit so it don't come popping out. Not that I think it's going to, but safety first. 'Cause I mean, I drove this in here, and this is a problem that happened long since before I started here. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get a jack or something, and I'm gonna prop up this transmission so it don't drop on me, and then start unhooking things. Yeah, I'll probably start unhooking the lines first. I'm gonna have to unhook the clutch linkage. What do we got over here? Really don't have anything over here. on this side. You got a couple air lines back here, right there, for the air filter regulator. There's a couple of probably the same lines right there. So yeah, right, not really too much. I mean, it's an Eaton 8LL transmission. And then I'll have to go inside and pull the shifter out. So yeah, that's what I'll start working on next. Okay, so I'm going to take the drive shaft apart here so I can take the carrier bearing off and separate these two pieces, because I have to take at minimum the carrier bearing down, and I want to have the carrier bearing replaced because it's all rotted out in there, and I don't think it's going to be too friendly to come apart. So I got this disconnected. I'm working on the air lines. So I've got 4 air lines here. I disconnected the harness. I pulled it back out of the way. I removed that bolt there that the air lines are connected to. I don't really see anything on this side. The engine needs to be disconnected. But as we come around up into here, there are another set of air lines right there. So there's another set of air lines there I gotta take off. There's some sensors on top of the engine, or not the engine, but on top of the transmission. I gotta disconnect the clutch linkage. See the rod? The rod right there goes to a bolt on the end of the clutch fork arm. And then I believe that's pretty much it for the things connected to the transmission. After I remove the transmission, I need to remove the starter, and well, I guess I can leave that in until I go to take the bell housing out. But I have to get, you can see the boot, maybe you can see the boot right there where the light is, where the clutch, where the shifter arm goes in. There's 4 bolts up there to remove that. I don't know if I can get to it through the floor or if I have to just reach over the top of the transmission. But that's where I'm at the moment, and that's what I'm gonna have to do next. So I'll come back when there's something else to show you. Okay, so it turns out these 3 rubber lines do not have to come off. They just go up to another valve in the front of the transmission, so they're all connected to the transmission itself. The only thing I had to come off was this one air line here that supplied air from the tank, and a little tiny one that was right there. These are just push fittings. You balance this. Let's still see. Alright, so right here, all you do is you push these in, and then you can pull the line out. So this little top collar is what bites into the hose. So you shove it in, and it will stay in there because this little collar here is like a retainer. So you just push that in, and then you can pull the hose out. So there's a little one here, and this one here. There was a plug around here somewhere. Right here for the speed sensor, there was a plug. And then there was another plug up on top of the transmission that I won't be able to show you. That was up there. So that's for the air lines in the back. I mean, obviously yours might be a little different than this one, but that's what this one is. So I come over here to this block. I don't know if you can see it, but right there, it's pretty bright. Right there, the little tiny one sticking up. That is the black one from the shifter for the range selector. And then this green one here. And then the red one up on top. So I believe that's all that's got to come off of airlines that are connected from the truck to the transmission. Like I said, that block right there is those rubber hoses are the ones that go to the back. And then I disconnected the linkage. So there's that. So I just got to finish taking the drive shaft out, get a jack under this, and then I can I still have to disconnect the shifter from the top, and then I can take this out. So shifter from the top, drive shaft, and then the bolts and bell housing, and it will come out. Okay, so I'm getting ready to take the shifter out. I guess you can have different seals and plates and stuff depending on the truck. This is a different one than I've seen before. Normally I've seen a rectangle plastic one with the boot in it. Obviously this one's a little different. So this has got this top boot here that actually looks like a big plunger, and I just pulled it up out of this lower section. So you get this other boot here that goes underneath, and it was in the floor like a grommet, and the floor was right in this groove here. So I just kind of pulled it back, stuck my fingers in there, and pushed it in. It's kind of like a little bucket right there. So I pulled it up through the floor, and then I guess you could take the shifter apart right here, or you see there's one. There is one bolt there, one bolt there, one there, and then one over here. So there's one in all four corners. So I'm going to use some extensions and a swivel socket, and I'm going to pull those four bolts out so I could pull the shifter out. You want to have it in neutral so it's easier to get it back in, and then that's how you do it. Shouldn't be any other tricks to it from what I've heard. So basically I've got all the airlines unhooked anyway. Yeah, so there's a green one that goes through, red and black I have unhooked, and I think I imagine the blue one is a supply, because that's what's left. I don't know. Goes forward. Okay, so yeah, obviously make sure all your airlines are unhooked, and then you can pull it out. Okay. Alright, so after about an hour or so of fighting with this, I finally got the drive shaft out. Here's the first section. That's what goes in the transmission. That's where the carrier bearing was hung up. And there's the rear section. The rear section appears to be seized together and is not telescoping, so I might have an issue with that. Also, I pretty much had to beat a socket on to get it to come off, because they were rusted to the point where the right size wasn't really fitting. So that's where I'm at now. Other than that, the transmission's all unhooked except for the front bolts on the bell housing, and that should be ready to come out too. So the next thing we'll be doing is repairing the wheel on the transmission jack, because while I was taking it out, I noticed that it is broken. So yeah, that's the next task, and then I'll be able to take the transmission out. Alright, so I came up here, I disconnected the shaft. It was a 12 millimeter or half inch bolt. That might have been 12 millimeter, but it was half inch is what I used, an Allen key to take the shaft apart. And then there was quick union, so I disconnected the unions up here, and I moved the top half of the shaft out of the way, so I just have the bottom half to deal with. Should make it a little bit easier. And So then I fixed the jack here. Made myself a wheel. See, just be solid steel wheel. So I cut the lines down. I've got the jack up underneath it right now. So the first thing I did was I disconnected that spring that carries the back of the transmission here, and I took the 2 bolts off. Those are 15/16. Oh, there's the nuts. So came up here, and I jacked up the engine. I just got it on one of the oil pan bolts. I'm trying not to deform the oil pan. So I got those couple. I got it on one of the bolts. So next I am taking the bolts out from around the bell housing because I'm pretty much all disconnected. They are 15mm. You could tell usually by, you see how you get the, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a little 10.9 on them, and that's the hardness, and they put the numbers for metric bolts, so those are all 15mm. I'm kind of lucky because half of them are missing because they either broke or fell out of the hole. So 1, 2, I think 3 were missing. I had 2 up on top, and I had, what do we got? I think we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, around 10 bolts. I'm not sure exactly, but that's kind of what I'm counting. So I was able to put a bunch of extensions together, and I mean, I reached up from around and I could get a couple of the bolts, but there's 2 of them on top of the transmission that one's there and one's there, that I got with a long socket and a swivel from way back here. Right there you can see one of those connectors that the electrical plug was in. And yeah, so I'm just going to go around them and take all the bolts out of the bell housing and then pull it back and lower it down and slide the transmission out of the way. Having trouble getting this thing to roll. That's what my problem was. I was hooked around a hydraulic hose up there. It wasn't letting me pull it out. Alright. Alright, well, we're almost there. Are we out? We are not yet. Alright. There's your crack. And then there's the other crack. Here's your clutch. And you can see we're just to the edge of the spline, so there's just a little bit of the throw, the shaft that goes into the bearing, the pilot bearing, whatever you call it. So yeah. My issue back here is I got cross member up there, and I'll hold this thing upside down now. See, I'm hitting all these hoses, and then the top of the transmission is sitting the stuff up underneath. So it's a pretty big transmission, so I'm just kind of trying to drag it through the lines and stuff, and then you're catching things. So it's just, yeah, it's a work in progress. Keep wiggling around, keep pulling it, and then eventually you have it out. So I'm gonna finish up on this, and then I'll come back after I get it out. Okay, so here's the transmission down and out. I managed to get it by everything. So you can see the crack a little bit better. So I gotta take out this pressure plate. I believe it's a dual disc. It kind of looked like it when I looked in there. All these bolts are 9/16, so I gotta remove all those and pull the clutch pack out, and then I have to take off the flywheel and pull that out. I have to remove the starter from the bell housing. Then I gotta unbolt the motor mounts after I prop the engine up so it doesn't go anywhere, and then I'll be able to get the bell housing out off the bolts underneath the flywheel, and then we should be set. And have to get the parts and put it back together. Alright, so I got the clutch out. This is the flywheel. I have to remove the 18mm bolts off of there. I don't really know why it had been grazing the heads here, but apparently that clutch was for some reason. So I'm gonna remove the flywheel, the starter, and there's the clutch over there. That's the inside of the transmission. So Basically, it's a pull type of clutch bearing. So pretty much this fork, when you push the clutch in, it rotates, and those little hooks on the bottom there, it pulls on the throwout bearing, and that's how it disengages the clutch. It actually pulls it instead of like a smaller vehicle where it pushes. Yeah, so this one pulls. So we come over here and look at the clutch. It's a 2-piece clutch. So you've got the pressure plate there. This is a ceramic one. So it's got 3 ceramic discs. They are directional. They have to go a certain direction. Then you got the intermediate plate here, which is basically just like a smooth plate between it for them. They are labeled. It's just this flywheel side, so it's got to go in that way. Otherwise, usually these the spline sections, they will contact each other, and then it won't disengage or engage. Either way, it won't function right anyway. Okay, so to get this bell housing off, I have to remove this tone ring, and here's a crank sensor right here. The plug is right there. So the tab was on this side. I just reached back there and kind of pushed that little tab in, and then pulled it off. So 2 things I did. One, I measured the air gap here, just in case that sensor has to be set. And 2, I marked the crank right where that roll pin is on both sides of the notch. So I knew where to put it back. So these 2 threaded bolt holes in here, they are 8mm fine thread, and then you tighten the bolts in and it pulls it off. It actually pulled here and here. It didn't pull the whole thing off, so I gotta like get behind it and pry at it to get these 2 upper ends off, because that's not going to pull it off. It's just going to pull these 2 pieces out. I mean, yours might pop off, but this one isn't, so that's what I need to do with this guy. Okay, so I mean, they thought ahead with this. This roll pin is actually in the crank, so this just sits right around the roll pin, and then you drive it on. So I looked out there. I didn't know if that's the way it went, so I marked it just in case. Yep, so now I have to take the starter out, which is a different angle, and then unbolt the bell housing and support the engine first before unbolting the bell housing and the motor mounts, and then I'll have it apart. Alright, so I got the bell housing out. It was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 15mm head bolts. I took the starter out. There's 3 18mm head bolts. I took the brackets off for the motor mounts. Those were 4 15mm head bolts. Those 4. There's a couple of things I didn't take into account when I started this. Was these are the 2 holes for the rear of the oil pan, so those 2 bolts have to come out. Those were 10mm. So you're going to need, obviously, the seal where it seals up against the back of the transmission. You may be able to reuse your oil pan gasket depending on the type of gasket. And the cam, there's a seal right here for the cam also. And the rear main seal, you're going to need 2. I was concerned with mine because when I pulled the tone ring off, it deformed one of the surfaces that was part of the rear main seal. So it concerned me that I was going to have an issue with it sealing right again. You see right there, I put a little divot there and a little divot there. So I was concerned it was going to seal, but I guess I don't have to worry about it now because I got to change it anyway. So I I left the starter intact and I ratchet strapped it up because it was kind of just hanging there anyway. And cables were pretty much stiff enough to hold it up, so I just put a ratchet strap around there and pulled it up around the motor mount, or the lift eye that's up on the top of the head. So you can see that seal was actually in the bell housing. So it's more than just a bell housing, it is the rear sealing into the engine. One thing that's weird is the oil. Like right here you can see the oil level, but when you look in there, it's like a perfect reflection of the bottom of the engine. So I'm looking, I was like, why are there rods in the oil pan? It's got to be a reflection of something. I looked down, I could see it, but it's like such a perfect reflection. So here's the back of your cam. You're probably going to want to get that seal. And then obviously that one that goes around. And when you put it back in, there's little bits of RTV right there in the bottom corners that you're going to want to put in. Yep. So that's where I'm at the moment. Here's the other side of the motor mounts. I had to heat the nuts up to get them off because they were seized in there. Much like everything, it's all seized together. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do about the oil pan because, as you can see, I have the engine propped up off of the bottom of the engine against the oil pan. So I mean, what I would like to do would be to drain the oil and take the oil pan off for putting this back on. It would definitely make it go a little bit smoother, which I might still do. I just have to figure out how I'm going to do it. Maybe I'll bolt a piece of angle iron or something up back here through these bolts, and then I'll move a jack back here so I can get the oil pan off. I do have this little bit of a lip right there I can get on. Right there I could probably get on. Not exactly sure. I'll have to figure out something. But right now I gotta clean this stuff up and try to locate some parts. Okay, so I was removing the inside ring that was pressed onto the crank. It's like wear ring, so you don't wear into the crank. You can wear into this, and it goes with the seal. It was stuck on there pretty good. So what I did was I took an air chisel and I just chiseled through this lip here on both sides to kind of take away the force and give it some place to kind of flex a bit, because you know this flat section of the ring is kind of what keeps it from deforming at all, and it holds the shape of the circle. So when I cut into it here, I just made sure I didn't go into the crank, and it gave it a place to kind of deflect and stretch a little bit, and it ended up coming off a lot easier than it was coming off. It wasn't really coming off at all. It was actually on there pretty hard. So once I did that, it started to work off pretty easy. I mean, I had to use pry bars, but it still came off. I had to use these numbers over here, the casting numbers, to find another flywheel housing. So I'm gonna go pick that up in a little while. And I ordered all the gaskets that I needed and the rest of the parts, and hopefully I don't have any troubles putting it back together.